Imagine living without a fridge. No electricity, no modern appliances, just you, nature, and the challenge of keeping food from spoiling. Sounds impossible. For generations, the Romani, often called gypsies, have traveled across Europe, living off the land and relying on ingenious food preservation techniques. They couldn't afford to let meat go to waste, so they developed methods that kept it safe to eat for months. For most of us, it's unthinkable since we depend on it for everything, from storing last night's leftovers to keeping our ice cream frozen. But for the Romani, this is just part of their everyday routine. They have perfected the skill of preserving meat without relying on electricity, using age-old methods passed down through generations. In fact, their techniques are so effective that they might even outperform your high-tech freezer. In today's world, we rely so heavily on refrigerators that we've forgotten the ancient, foolproof ways of keeping meat fresh for months, sometimes even years. But what if I told you that the Romani people, a culture renowned for their survival skills and resourcefulness, have been preserving meat without electricity for centuries? And they still do it today. In a world dominated by modern appliances, the Romani people set themselves apart by embracing traditional preservation methods. No advanced technology, no refrigeration, just tried and true practices that have stood the test of time. They take self-sufficiency to another level, and when it comes to meat preservation, they excel. Their approach doesn't just keep food from spoiling, it enhances its longevity and even improves its taste. Think preserving meat is just about keeping it edible? Think again. The Romani people have refined these methods to not only maintain freshness but also intensify the flavor. Today, I'll reveal 5 traditional Romani techniques for storing meat without refrigeration. Whether you're preparing for emergencies, living off-grid, or just curious about old-world survival skills, these methods will change the way you think about food storage. Before we get into the solutions, let's understand the problem. Meat is highly perishable. At room temperature, bacteria multiply rapidly, breaking down proteins and fats, leading to spoilage within hours. Most people assume that without refrigeration, meat lasts only a day or two, but that's only true if you don't know how to preserve it. The Romani people mastered natural preservation techniques that halt bacterial growth without electricity. These methods work by removing moisture, bacteria need water to survive, creating hostile environments using salt, smoke, or fat, lowering temperature naturally through underground storage. Now let's explore these methods in detail. Salt, a staple in food preservation for centuries, plays a crucial role in their process. They have turned this simple mineral into an essential tool for keeping meat fresh. Salt has long been one of nature's most reliable preservatives, and the Romani people know exactly how to use it to their advantage. By coating meat with generous amounts of salt, they extract moisture, a key step in preventing bacterial growth. Since moisture is the main culprit in spoilage, salt acts as a powerful defense, preserving the meat effectively. But this process isn't just about sprinkling salt and hoping for the best. It's a precise technique, almost like a sacred tradition. Step-by-step Guide 1. Choose the right salt. Use rock salt or pure sea salt, never table salt, which contains anti-caking agents that interfere with preservation. 2. Layer the meat. Coat every inch of the meat in a thick layer of salt. 3. Press and store. Place the meat in a cool, dry place, ideally under weight to squeeze out excess moisture. Wait. After a few days, the meat becomes firm and preserved. How long does it last? Weeks to months if stored properly. For even longer storage, the Romani would combine salting with smoking. The salt doesn't just season the meat, it works its way in, pulling out moisture and boosting the natural flavor, while acting as a barrier against spoilage. The beauty of this method is how incredibly simple it is. While most people today are busy tossing their meat into freezers, the Romani people have long relied on salt to handle the heavy lifting. And here's the best part. This process gives the meat a deep, rich flavor that frozen meat just can't compete with. It's like a well-kept family secret, passed down through generations, with each household adding their own little spin to the classic technique. But using salt alone doesn't always cut it, especially when you're dealing with changing weather or moving from place to place. The Romani knew this, and that's where smoking comes in. It's not just about adding that delicious smoky flavor we all love, it's also a powerful way to preserve food. Over the years, the Romani have perfected the art of smoking meat, using it to dry the meat out even further and make it last far longer than anything fresh. Smoking isn't just about taste, it changes the whole environment around the meat. The smoke, combined with low heat and reduced moisture, creates a space where bacteria struggle to survive. Done right, this method can extend a piece of meat's shelf life for months or even up to a year without losing that amazing flavor. Just imagine opening your pantry and pulling out a beautifully smoked cut of meat, ready to feed your family, no fridge needed. That's the kind of simple wisdom the Romani have been living by for generations. You ever notice how some smells just stick with you forever? For me, it's the smell of slow burning wood on a crisp morning, because that's the smell of smoked meat. And for many Romani families, it was the smell of survival. Picture this: a small caravan parked at the edge of a forest. The sun hasn't fully risen yet. There's a quiet fire burning low and steady, not for warmth, but for something way more important. A piece of meat hangs just above it, suspended by a string, gently swaying as wisps of smoke rise and wrap around it like a warm blanket. There's no fridge out here, no freezer, just knowledge passed down through generations. See, the Romani didn't smoke meat just for flavor, that though the taste, they did it because it worked. Smoking did two powerful things at once. It slowly dried out the meat and at the same time, the smoke itself, especially when it came from the right kind of wood, acted like a natural preservative, kind of like nature's own antibacterial shield. They knew exactly which woods to use too. If they wanted a bold, earthy flavor, they'd burn oak or hickory. But if they had apple or cherry wood nearby, that meat would come out sweet, rich, and full of aroma. It wasn't just survival, it was a culinary tradition. Now, they wouldn't just throw the meat into a fire pit. First, they'd prep it, usually by salting it to draw out extra moisture. Then, they'd hang it up high over the smoke, not too close to the flames. The key was patience. Too much heat and you'd cook it. But slow, gentle smoke over several hours or even days transformed it into something magical. Some families even tossed in rosemary or thyme to the fire. Not just because it smelled amazing, but because those herbs have natural antibacterial oils. It was both smart and delicious. And here's the cool part. Once it was done, that smoked meat could last for months, just wrapped in cloth and tucked away in a dry place. No fridge, no power bill, just pure old-world genius. It's more than just food. It's a reminder that simplicity, patience, and a little bit of wood smoke can go a long, long way. But not every day was cold. Not every journey stopped near a forest where the right kind of wood was easy to find. And sometimes, after a long day of travel or trade, the Romani didn't want to tend a fire for hours. They needed another way to keep their food safe, especially in warmer months or when space was tight. That's where another bit of old wisdom came in. A method that wasn't loud or flashy, but deeply effective. It didn't need smoke or salt or even air, it just needed fat. Yeah, fat. Simple, ordinary animal fat, but used in a way that turned cooked meat into something that could last for months, even a full year. Let's imagine. You've got a big pot bubbling away over a gentle fire. In it, pieces of duck or pork or chicken simmer low and slow, almost like they're bathing. But not in water. Nope. They're gently cooking in their own fat. The smell? Warm, rich, and savory. It fills the air with comfort. Once the meat is tender and falling apart, it's lifted out and set aside. But that fat, that golden, shimmering fat, it's not wasted. It's the star of the show. In a quiet moment, someone pulls out a clean jar or clay pot. The cooked meat is carefully packed inside, still warm, and then, here's the magic, the fat is poured over the top. Slowly, until every piece is completely covered. No air, no gaps. Just meat, sealed tight under a protective layer of pure fat. And just like that, the meat is safe. No fridge, no freezer, no chemicals, just knowledge. The fat hardens as it cools, creating a natural barrier against oxygen and bacteria, kind of like an edible time capsule. But of course, the Romani didn't stop there. They always added their own touch. Maybe it was a few crushed garlic cloves tucked between the layers, or a sprinkle of crushed black pepper, or herbs like thyme and bay leaves dropped into the pot while the fat was still hot. These little additions weren't just for flavor, they had antibacterial properties too. And then, that jar would go into a dark pantry, or under a bench in the wagon, or buried in a cool spot in the earth. Weeks would go by, sometimes months. But when it was finally opened, that meat would be tender, flavorful, and perfectly preserved. The fat had kept out the air, the cooking had killed the bacteria, and the seasoning had turned it into something way more than survival food. It was a meal, a feast even. You'd slice off a piece and warm it up in a pan, maybe with some fresh bread or root vegetables. The rest? Back under the fat, back in the jar, good to go again. It wasn't just clever, it was practical. And in true Romani fashion, it was beautiful in its simplicity. Because while the rest of the world was learning to depend on electricity, the Romani people were still relying on time-tested traditions. Quiet, humble tricks that kept families fed no matter where they went. So whether it was salt, smoke, or fat, each method had its place. And each one told a story. A story of resilience, of movement, of survival and joy, of doing more with less. At the heart of it, these old-world preservation methods, salting, smoking, and sealing in fat, aren't just about keeping meat from going bad. They're about something way deeper. They're about trusting nature, about slowing down, about doing things with your hands, with patience, and with purpose. And for the Romani people, these weren't just cooking techniques. They were life skills, passed down through generations, honed by movement, necessity, and a deep understanding of how to live well with very little. While so many of us today chase convenience, stock up on plastic-wrapped food, and rely on machines to keep our meals fresh, the Romani remind us that there's another way, a slower way, a smarter way, a way that brings more meaning, more connection, and, more flavor into our everyday lives. So next time you're in your kitchen, think about that. About a time when food was preserved not by gadgets, but by knowledge. And maybe, just maybe, you'll feel inspired to try one of these old techniques yourself. Because living with less doesn't mean missing out. Sometimes it means tasting more. Subscribe to keep the wisdom coming, and watch the next one to keep learning how to live with more meaning.